Good evening, everyone. If you haven't already found your seat, I hope you'll find your seat. And before we get started, our kitchen crew always appreciates it that if you have an empty glass, if you'll pass that empty glass to the middle aisle, we will take it to the kitchen so that our kitchen crew can get started. If you don't have an empty glass, keep your glass as long as you would like. But if it is empty, it's a help. So we'll walk through in just a minute and get it from you. Now I'd like to invite Denise to introduce the series, and then I'll be right back.
Welcome, everyone. I think, is this working? Nope. Hello? Welcome, everyone, to the Tippy McMichael lecture for the spring lecture. My name is Denise Greathouse. I'd like to begin by acknowledging Tippy McMichael and expressing our gratitude for her generous gift that made this lecture series possible. Upon her death, Tippy bequeathed a portion of her estate to enhance the life and the work of the church. The topics of this series are intended to explore a wide range of spiritual issues and feature speakers from varied disciplines and from different religious traditions. The series is funded from St. Paul's Endowment Fund and with additional support provided by parishioners and friends of St. Paul's Church. The lectures are offered freely to the community from which St. Paul's draws its life. However, donations are appreciated, so if anyone would like to offer a small donation for the lecture tonight, there's a basket up front. And if anyone is interested in offering a donation to the Permanent Endowment Fund, they can see me afterwards, and I'll be happy to put them in contact with the person that they need to talk to. Donations always help us to sustain and to grow the lecture series. I also wanted to point out that there's a sign-up sheet in the front where if you have not seen the film or if you would like to watch it again, you can stream it for 3 days. So the link is available from tonight at 7 until Tuesday at 7. So if you'll put your email on the list up by the front, then I will send out the link to those of you who haven't seen it or who would like to see it again. So now I'd like to turn this over to our rector, Evan Gardner, who's going to introduce our speaker. Thank you, Evan.
I'm so glad y'all are here, and I'm really glad to be here too. Isn't it wonderful to be a part of an organization, a group that gets to hear from people who are excellent in their field and people whose lives and witness, absolutely, whose lives and witness and work make a difference in the world and a difference in our lives. I sense that, and I'm really glad that we are able to share this evening with George Anthony Morton. How many of you have seen the Master of Light documentary? So a good number. Oh, I love it. When I saw it, I was amazed at how Mr. Morton was able to give himself so fully to the audience. And when I met him today, I had to remind myself that we'd never met before because he was so, I didn't want to scare him off, but he was so, I perceived this so vulnerable, so authentic, so available to the audience, and I'm grateful for that. I'll remind you that Mr. Morton grew up in Kansas City. He's learned since, not that long ago, there are roots in Arkansas, Van Buren and Fort Smith roots that he is interested in exploring more. After a 10-year sentence in federal prison for drug-related offenses, Mr. Morton relocated to Atlanta and has continued the work of being an artist and bringing art to metropolitan Atlanta. I am particularly interested in hearing about his experience with art as an opportunity for healing, with racial injustice, with the carceral system, and what it means to be devoted to and dedicated to hope in the midst of such challenging odds. And I'm really delighted that Mr. Morton is with us. He is going to speak to us after we watch our first clip, a clip from the documentary. So after it, let's welcome him with applause. But first, a clip from the documentary.
humbled to be before you this evening in a church. Yeah. So be forewarned. I mean, it's some, as you know, some language here. I tried to edit out and think about that, but if you will excuse some of the language, I'd appreciate it. It's pretty honest. So my name is George Anthony Morton. My journey as an artist actually started just a few hours away from here, Kansas City, Missouri, where I grew up. The oldest of my mother's 11 children, and she had me at 15, and I would end up in prison for 11 years for a nonviolent drug offense.
I'm going to adjust that real quick.
Sure.
Excuse me 2 seconds. Sorry about that.
Not loud enough?
No, but we're getting a little feedback.
Mic check. How does that work? Should have did a mic check. Can you hear me? So what I'll do is I'll maybe speak to a clip, show a clip, and maybe ruminate on it and take a couple questions in between clips, maybe pertaining to the clip so we can keep it on track and then open it all the way up towards the end if that's okay. But I would eventually find myself in federal prison. It's the best thing that ever happened to me, I gotta say. It was the most transformative experience, but not because federal prison is inherently a great place. I somehow was able to transform that experience into something maybe other than what it was intended to be, even though penitentiaries come from the word penitent, right? This idea of someone who is penitent and they want to go transform. I like to think I sought to embody that experience in a real way, but I started in Leavenworth, United States Penitentiary, one of the oldest and most infamous places in our country, and ironically found myself in Colorado, a place called Florence, Colorado, where there was a bit of serendipity there because I would get out and end up in Florence, Italy, walking the same cobblestones of the great Renaissance masters. So I always saw my life in this spiritual way of serendipitous and synchronicities, kind of like this book called The Alchemist. I don't know if you all have heard of it. This guy's just on this journey and he's just seeing the signs everywhere. I've always saw my life in that way. And so while there, I definitely appreciated the signs that I saw and the opportunities that I could find within that setback of an experience, and later found myself in Italy studying the Renaissance masters. And so that's a brief bit about my journey that we'll probably expand upon as time goes on. And with that, I ended up getting out, and I did open a studio where I teach in the community now. I was the first to graduate from their school in Florence, and I'm now offering those same teachings to my community as well. And so it's pretty huge for me to be able to give back to the community that hoisted me up. And so while you all are appreciative of me being here, I'm equally grateful that you all would have me. And so if there's no questions about that, we can go to the next clip.
Anybody have questions before we move to the next clip? We'll go have a little bit of a back and forth, which I'm grateful for. Yeah, Ann.
George, I'm curious how old you were when you went to prison.
Good question. I was 20 years old, so quite young. But yeah, I would get there and they'll tell me, you got another bid in you. You're so young. I'd be like, what? No, I don't. But yeah, I was fortunate in that sense because I went in at an age that felt like developmental years. To some people, maybe your best years, but it felt like a rite of passage for me. And so, and I also felt like I was escaping an even greater prison of hopelessness in my community, and saw it as an opportunity, fortunately.
Yeah, I just thought it would be good if you might tell us what happened, that there was a person who was in your life that made a difference to you, that kind of took you someplace and inspired you to become an artist.
Yeah. So when I was a juvenile, I ended up going to a juvenile facility for some small petty offense. I was a misguided youth. And I met this math teacher who helped me get my GED in the juvenile facility, and her name was Sharon Rouvier. I haven't been able to find her to this day, but that was a pivotal moment for me. She took me, or told me in the juvenile facility, okay, when you get out, I'm gonna find you and I'm gonna take you to the Nelson Atkins Art Museum. You all know that place, right? It's an oasis in the desert, you know. I tell my family all the time, you know, go there, get a little slice of culture. They always have awesome exhibitions. It's kind of like the Crystal Bridges here, I'd imagine. But yeah, I didn't know stuff like that existed. I didn't know that people could even have a career in art. And so she saw me when I was in juvenile, struggling through my math portion of the GED test, and said, hey, I know a way that I can show you math and make it easy. It's not the math you hate, it's the feeling you get when you do math. And she said, what if I can show you a way where math can help your art? And she started introducing me to these design principles and concepts. And she saw the work that I was doing. By that time, I was the person making all the art projects in the facility and bulletin boards. And she saw some promise. And as I was being released, she got my information, told me she would find me and take me to the Nelson Atkins. And she actually did. She called me, and we met up. We went there. And her last name being Rouvier, it makes sense now why she would take me straight to the 19th century French Impressionists. But when I saw the Rembrandt on the wall, I was transfixed. It was just like, it was definitely a moment for me. And it was the picture that you may see in one of the clips, but it's definitely in the documentary that I'm doing a copy of. And so I'm ever thankful for that experience because it changed my whole entire trajectory and definitely planted a seed that would germinate later and become very, very impactful. So I'm gonna go to the next clip. That's a Tibetan singing bowl. That stuff puts me in a space, like every time he does it, it's just like Pavlov's dogs, I don't know. Yeah, so that particular scene is right after a pretty heavy moment in the film that I had to cut out because I realized where I was coming to, and it was my mom. I had a pretty heavy moment with my mother on the phone. She was asking for money, and she's just done a lot to bring pain to my life. And she's been, and if you've seen the film, you know, I see her as an equal blessing as well. And a lot of the film is about being able to see the positive within the negative and the negative within the positive. And so I kind of see her in that way. And this idea about embracing the darkness within one's own existence is similar to what I just said. Seeing prison as a paradise, seeing a setback as a potential opportunity. I think it was John Milton who said, the mind is, I'm paraphrasing, it's like the mind is a heck of a place. It can make a heaven of a hell or a hell out of a heaven. And I kind of adopted that ideology. When I was in prison, I would read so many books. Like I had so many books that they deemed it a fire hazard and said I had to like mail some home. It's true. And so I would read books like As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, for example, and that's based on a biblical scripture where Christ said, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. But I actually remember a poem from that book. I read it so many times. Can I say it? Wow, yeah, this is kind of impromptu. It said, mind is the master power that molds and makes, and man is mine, and evermore she takes. The tool of thought, shaping what he wills, brings forth 1,000 joys, 1,000 ills. She thinks in secret, and it comes to pass. Environment is but his looking glass. Very impactful for me, and I had to, make it kind of androgynous because there is a woman's version, as a woman thinketh. So these are the principles that really helped me in that dark moment. Being able to read books that felt like they were written by the hand of God themselves from every faith tradition, self-help, the whole thing. And I also began to see prison similar to my life being similar to the story of Joseph in a way. And there's references made to that, like symbolically in the film. And so I would think about the great people historically who've been in similar circumstances and find strength in that. So I would say that was extremely helpful. Having a talent or a sense of purpose helped me see my time differently as well and gave me great peace. And with that, I'll open up for any questions you all may have.
As a reminder, there are people watching online, which is why microphones are so important. But I wanted to ask, tell me about the importance of telling the truth. Like it feels like there's a lot of painful things that you talk about and that you show. How has telling the sort of the frank truth been important to your own healing?
Wow, that's a curveball. It's funny though because the style of art that I practice is rooted in realism, and this idea of truth being beauty and beauty being truth is something I do try to embrace. Initially in my therapy sessions, I was kind of guarded. I guess I'm going to try to relate to it in my own personal experience. But I noticed the more that I just started really being honest with myself, I started to experience the transformative power of it. it's deeply important because it's easy to live in a bubble where you create a reality that's not really true and kind of continue a cycle and wonder why maybe nothing's changing in your life. But until you wake up and start being honest with yourself about your own shortcomings, nothing really changes. And the truth for me in this film and what I try to show to the world as a metaphor with my own mother, my own life, is this idea of doing shadow work. It's kind of a Jungian concept. My therapist is a Jungian analyst. And the idea of shadow work kind of embraces those unconscious parts of ourselves that are hidden, that I've come to learn as something that if you don't go to it, it comes to you, it comes to the surface. It shows up in the form of complexes, triggers, and I had to be honest about that. And the minute I did it, I started witnessing the transformation. And I'm also seeing that the world has an opportunity to do a collective shadow work on some of the things we all like to keep hidden historically, about our own great mother, how we treat Mother Nature, how we treat our mothers in general, how we treat the women, feminine energy. I think this is really what helped me to see my own mother anew. I started thinking of her in that broader concept and having some real honest moments about that. But yeah, truth is a funny thing, you know, because it can be a matter of perspective. And I had to really gain some perspective on what that is. But that's a tough question. It's a tough question.
This kind of falls in line with this subject. I was just wondering, what is the lesson that has taken you the longest to learn?
Yeah, another tough one. Well, one of them for sure has been that you can't take everyone with you. I attempted to move my mother and some family members to Atlanta and just rescue my whole family, you know. But what I began to learn is that we all have to walk our own path and face our own shadow parts for ourselves, and no one can do that for you. And so as much as I wanted it for certain relatives and people in my life, it was a bitter thing to swallow when I realized that just because I am experiencing these transformative experiences doesn't mean that everyone else is. And I wanted to share that and impart that and let the people I love have a piece of that, but they weren't ready. And so I figured that the best thing that I can do is to lead by example and continue to just demonstrate that in hopes that eventually they come around. But at the same time, it's a journey and a process of self-discovery, just doing my own inner work. And so that is still an ongoing process for myself, and I'm still undoing so much I hope that answers the question. Yeah. Any more?
First of all, thanks for being here tonight.
Of course, thank you.
A great part of the documentary, and even this clip, shows you doing a self-portrait, which strikes me as one of the scariest darn things you can actually do in your life. I mean, when you make decisions about how to portray yourself in that portrait, what decisions did you make? What quandaries did you come up against? How did you face yourself? In other words, in the making that portrait.
It's an excellent question. I mean, when you really think about it, like, that's heavy. I mean, the concept of the self, like, what is that? Like, who am I? Why am I here? What is the self? And you're all alone looking in this mirror face to face with all of your shortcomings, your strengths, your weaknesses, and it's lonely, and you're just looking in the mirror. I was looking at artists from the past to see what they were after, like maybe some of the philosophical ideas that they had around it. So I was studying my favorite 17th century masters like Rembrandt and Diego Velázquez. But simultaneously, I happened to be going to therapy. And so it was really heavy to have a therapy session, and then I'm like right back in the mirror just staring at myself. But deeply illuminating for sure. And so I think of it as a good practice to continue like self-awareness and just honesty in that regard. And so I stare in that mirror and I see, even the wrinkles. I just noticed some freckles popping up on my face recently. But it was definitely this deep philosophical inquiry into the idea of self, which is elusive and hard to understand, and so it goes pretty deep. And I guess I wanted to say more than anything, that's how I thought of it. And compositionally, I set it up similar to certain old masters. I was looking at very particular paintings and lining, like my main eye lines up with my heart, and it's right in the center of the entire canvas. And so I was kind of geeking out on all the design stuff more than anything, and how these design principles align with the philosophical ideas that I'm talking about. Because I believe that's how the old masters would have thought. They had a different consciousness than we have today. They didn't have cars and cell phones and all the distractions. And so it definitely slowed time down and allowed for just revelation to happen. So I saw it as a somewhat sacred and spiritual practice in a way as well, that brought about a lot. But it's hard, I noticed after a while, like just sitting there when you can go out, do anything, go hang out with friends, and run from yourself in that way. But I tried to face it head on. But it wasn't always easy, especially during the process of making the film, dealing with family, talking to my therapist, and I'm looking at myself, and I'm like, what? Yeah, if I'd known what I was getting myself into beforehand, I probably would have had second thoughts. But I'm glad I did it, and I'm continuing that is any sign that I have some appreciation for it, then I guess I do, because it's definitely a part of my practice.
To the question,
Yes.
they say that the eyes are the windows to the soul. So when you're painting and you're having to capture your own eyes, how do you go about that? Because that's such an important part of any image.
Yeah, and it's really tricky because you look in the mirror and then you're not looking in the mirror anymore. You're looking in the canvas, and you can't do both simultaneously. And so somehow I have to get that exact perspective onto my canvas too. I just thought I'd add that in there. That's like a technical thing that's not easy to do. And it's one of the things I realized around the greatness of a Rembrandt, because somehow this guy was able to get it onto the canvas in a way that you see it as if you're looking in a mirror. And it's two different perspectives. It's tricky. What is the question again? Like, yeah, because
When you capture somebody in a photograph, well, I'm thinking of a photograph, but also in a painting, the life in the person comes through the eyes,
Gotcha.
right? And so I think if you're painting an image of yourself, there are times when you can maybe see sadness or happiness, or how do you bring that out in your photograph, in your paintings?
you know, honestly, there's this idea for me that I think it was Andrew Wyatt who said it. He said, if the emotion is strong enough, it'll travel down your arm onto the surface without being self-conscious of it. And I think that's what I find is happening. It's not necessarily like contrived. That particular moment that we just saw, just before you see my daughter, I have this argument with my mom, and I sit down in front of the canvas, and you can tell I'm like upset. And it finds its way onto the surface somehow. And I can't say that I was necessarily trying to look mean, but it happens. And then, you know, like later I go look at it and I reflect on it, and it's like a diary entry or journal entry or something, and it's like, wow, I was upset. And so, in general though, the eyes are pretty elusive, you know, when painting your own or someone else's. And it's something that we're using to actually paint with. So it's like I'm trying to paint someone's eye and see them through my own eyes. It's one of my favorite things to do, but definitely a challenge. But you're right, they do reveal a lot. Yeah, it's a tough thing, I guess. For me as a painter, the how has to do with the tradition of painting that I come under, and it's an American Impressionist tradition in a way, which started with a guy like Velázquez, where you just take in the impression of what you see and abstractly make the shape of it. And so I don't get lost into the difficulty of it, of whatever I may be painting at any given time. I just try to see things as abstract shapes and faithfully render it, or the impression it has on me, in a way. And either it works or it doesn't. Yeah. So Trayshawn, my nephew, he's kind of like this, in the film, represents my younger self in a lot of ways. And it was an opportunity to speak to that inner child as well as to him. Something a lot of people don't know is when I was in school at the Florence Academy, I adopted my nephew. He was going through a rough moment, and he lived with me for about 18 months. And it was hard because I was still in school, and I was attending the U.S. branch in Jersey City, just outside of New York. And so I asked my teachers if he could come there sometimes and I could work on his picture, which wasn't possible for like certain policies, child labor law or something like that. But the weirdest thing happened, and my teachers, I still love them to this day, and it was a hard thing to kind of process at the time, but after he visited New York and I sent him back home, I got him in some karate classes. And so my teacher had met him by that time because he was walking around the studios with me. I was showing him around. And I had this video of him practicing his martial arts. And my teacher made the weirdest comment. He said, "Great, now he can start robbing people." And I really think this guy, he's just kind of socially awkward. Like he didn't, he just kind of just said, it was like a Freudian slip maybe, I don't know. It just, and so I kind of like chuckled a little bit and said, whoa, like, and thought about it. And that clip that we just showed was really like kind of like synthesis of that moment for me. This idea of being told that he's gonna go steal and be a thief just by learning karate, like this indwelling fear that people will have immediately. And so no one really knows that but my teachers and my editors, who they did a great job with that. But I also travel to Egypt with my teaching studio a lot. I lead tours actually. So basically my teaching studio, Atelier South, we do guided tours throughout Egypt. And so from Cairo to Luxor, I walk people through the pyramids, through the temples, and we talk about a lot of the design principles, just more so rooted in the design and artistic concepts that you get. And what I was sharing with him is just like what I've found to be the self-help principles that have come down through the Renaissance from ancient Egypt and mythology and everything. I find that stuff endlessly fascinating. And yeah, I just wanted to impart some of that to him. But like I said, in a lot of ways, it's what I wish I would have had. And I could tell that he's receiving it. And so, yeah, that's kind of what that moment was about. Want to open it up for questions? Anybody?
Anyone have any questions?
Well, this question is a mixture, I guess, of technical and the spiritual things you're talking about, but could you talk to us some about your relationship to color and the meanings of color as they come to you, but also the meanings that you give to the colors and what it might mean to you as you mix them and so forth?
Yeah. I tend to see the world like as a mix of colorful grays. It's not super chromatic all the time. Sometimes it is. And my palette tends to be rather simple. I don't put a lot of today's newest synthetic colors into my palette. I haven't been. I may start one day, but my favorite artist didn't. And I started looking into that a bit. The black, the red, the yellow, and the white. And I kind of see them as the colors of creation. They have their own elements associated with it. And so, yeah, I was talking to a Native American shaman, and he was telling me some stuff about that. And it was kind of interesting. He said black corresponds to like water and like the prime material. He said red is the earth, and he was relating to the races too, black, red, yellow, white people, and it was really interesting. And so as the colors of creation, it made sense. And so I focus more on tonality, but like, and then he said yellow is air and white is fire. And so I always found that like pretty profound. It's like the alchemical stages. And I relate that philosophical thought to my creative process. And I believe that that's what the ancients were doing, because that palette comes down through the Greeks, I think, and ancient Egyptians as well. Like I kind of saw some of their palettes when I was over there. They did introduce a blue in Egypt as well, but I find when I'm getting skin tones, I don't require much more than that simple palette. But yeah, color is a pretty deep thing to think about, actually. Maybe there's more I could say about it, but yeah. I love the score of the film, music. I guess I'll start this portion by sharing what South by Southwest said when we won Best Documentary of the Year for 2022. I really felt seen. I felt like they understood what we were after. So I'll read it. Jury report, documentary feature competition, presented by IMAX, winner, Master of Light. They said, in both substance and form, Master of Light is a gift. The earnest and gifted painter George Anthony Morton embeds viewers in his world as he struggles to render his mother, both on the canvas and in his psyche. Boostin, who is the co-creator, disabuses us of static tropes about America's merciless drug war and about contemporary art. This is the part that I love. With astonishing intimacy, the film's visuals build an artful bridge between 2 and 3-dimensional worlds, or 2 and 3-dimensional realms, that are deeply rooted and utterly transcendent. Put this painting of a film in a museum next to a Rembrandt and a Morton. My favorite part is the film's visuals build an artful bridge between 2 and 3-dimensional realms that are deeply rooted and utterly transcendent. That was throughout the entire film, the entire subplot, wanting to like go into what duality means. cinematically, with the form, with what's being expressed, and you'll see it come up in different forms. And I think it just has to do with this idea of understanding that we're dual beings. And I'm seeing my circumstances as dualistic in nature, and always able to see the positive and the negative within the positive, but embracing the totality of the whole. It was such an epiphany for me, thinking of creation that way, thinking of history that way, and the necessity of opposites, and how even in the word individual is dual, you know, this indivisible duality. It was such a revelation. And so I wanted to really get that across in this film, and the idea of embracing the opposites within ourselves and within creation as a whole. It was, yeah, I think that was a good, like, I felt really seen that because they said it, you know, and I was like, wow, they get it. These people get it. And like I said, the idea of the conscious and the unconscious within my therapy processes was a huge thing for me as well, so that I'm not focusing on just my conscious self, but what's happening in my unconscious too. And embracing that as really the whole entire ocean, and the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg is consciousness, but like really what's going on underneath that is where it's at. And so the idea of ritual, when I'm telling my nephew about ritual, for me is about making things unconscious, making my practice so repetitive that it just flows from the unconscious. I really started to embrace this idea of both sides of the coin. So, any questions?
Yes, I'm not sure where it comes in the video, but you talk about following this redemptive path. That seemed to be a powerful theme. And a redemptive path that incorporates both the light and the dark experiences. Where does that come from? Where did that start for you, being on a redemptive path, and where do you see that coming from?
Well, I was just sharing with someone earlier that I was born on the autumn equinox, so it's like this idea of literally being born where at that time of the year where it's equal light, equal dark. And I feel like it's just something that's in me, that I began to see the world through those lenses naturally. But it would probably come from the struggle, like experiencing difficulties, I believe, has a way of bringing out one's sublime qualities if it's in you, you know. It can bring things out of you in a way. And I would attribute it to having such a challenging time, and being able to see the beauty in it, you know. Sometimes we run from life's challenges and we run from pain, but we could be running from our own growth. We could be running from new levels of awareness that you can only learn by going through something. And so maybe a little shadow work is healthy for most people. I find that we're incomplete people if we don't embrace the other side of ourselves. And for me, I think going through difficulty is the price tag one has to pay to mine the treasures of one's soul, or the things that you're referencing, like this redemptive spirit, this, it was the things that I learned, the books that I would read that taught me that. I would begin to see that, like, all great things has a difficulty tag associated with it. You have childbirth. It's painful, but then there's a beautiful child that comes out of it. You have resources in the earth that requires digging, to get the diamonds and all the different minerals out of the earth. You have all of these things that come through difficulty. And so I would say that spirit, that mindset, was revealed to me in my darkest moments. And it's no coincidence that, the people of all religious scriptures, they would go off into solitude and have divine revelation revealed to them, whether it's Muhammad in the cave, whether it's Buddha in the forest, or whether it's Jesus in the desert for 40 days, 40 nights. My experience of solitude showed me a lot as well. And so that's why I remain grateful for it. I would find myself throughout my 11-year sentence, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years in, people would be getting out, and I would think, like, I don't want to leave yet. And it was not great in there, but like, I knew that I was in this incubator of development, and I wanted to develop fully. That's just how much I embrace what there was to learn from a seemingly negative experience. There was great positive within it.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
At first, I was going to ask you if you ever did any three-dimensional art. But the longer I've been looking at this painting behind you, the more it looks like it's in 3 dimensions.
Thank you.
Did you do that on purpose, or how did you do that?
Can you show it? Can you show the other image? Yeah, he'll put an image up. Basically, her name is Maryam, or Mary. That's the Arabic version for Mary. So I was deeply inspired by this particular model. I was in a school at the time that where we were always depicting people that were from everyone else's community, but I never could paint people that looked like the people I grew up with or people I knew. And so when she came through the door, I was like, yes, finally. And I basically drew her from life. Over the course of 10 sessions, she would sit for 20 minutes at a time, 3-hour blocks, and I would render her the way that I saw her. And once again, I think it was the emotion that I had that kind of came out more than anything. But yeah, I was just excited to finally depict something that I cared about depicting. This was in a school academic environment at the time. And so the way that I do it is going from the 2-dimensional to the 3 by drawing a bunch of, and I even have like process stages of that, but like just creating like 2-dimensional shapes, the square and the circle, triangle, and eventually making it 3-dimensional by adding form to it and shading and thinking about the direction of the light, which is coming from up above, upper right. And in viewing her from a viewing distance where I can basically transfer it from left to right, where I'm seeing her at the same scale that I want to depict it. It's how I believe Velázquez would have done it. And at the time I was studying a Velázquez painting at the Met called Juan de Pareja. It was his assistant and slave at the time, but it's drawn exactly in the same way. He had this like abstract kind of afro, similar lighting setup. And so I would go to the Met and I would sketch from this drawing by a 17th century Spanish master. And then I would go right back to the studio and draw her. And I think that kind of crept into it as well. But just training in that particular method. We got someone back there. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
So you have a blank canvas. Where do you start? Where do you put your pen or your? Oh, I was going to say, when you have a blank canvas, where do you start? Like, do you start at the hair? Do you start at the nose? Where do you start to build the composition?
It's a good question, and it's also an opportunity to talk about, like, the idea of duality is just all throughout, because there's this Apollonian aspect to it, and there's the Dionysian, like left brain, right brain. And so there's times when I'm thinking pure abstraction, like right brain. I don't need to name anything. It's just like shapes. And so in this instance, I would mark like the top and the bottom, my most extreme parameters, and just start drawing abstractly and almost emotively without necessarily identifying what I'm drawing. And eventually, once I get a level of an impression down, I try to begin to understand what it is I'm drawing. So I study the anatomy and the skull features, and eventually just resolve it and push it. And you edit things out, but very much thinking in pairs, thinking in twos in that way. It's really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Did I miss right here?
We keep skipping her.
She was first, okay.
Yes, thank you very much for your incredibly beautiful images. I wanted to ask you about your comments about the fullness, the darkness and the light, the duality and the togetherness, because it seems to me that these days there is a significant push in this country to suppress the whole side of life and to raise up only the bright. And I'm very distressed about that. The clearest example, unfortunately, is in Arkansas, but I heard last night that Iowa has passed a law saying that the children in the schools should be taught only that which is praiseworthy and exceptional about America. And they attached a curriculum. I didn't see the curriculum, but I kind of have an idea what they might be talking about. Can you please help me deal with this?
So we're going to solve the world's problems today, huh? You said the suppress the what side initially? What was that first word?
Dark or whatever they perceive as being negative about America or shameful.
Right.
And I guess they're thinking about wokeness, I imagine.
Right. Fear, it feels like fear, but I mean, what do I know, right? I haven't been around that long, but there's just things that we carry in our collective kind of unconscious that I think we fear, like what would come about. Wow, I mean, that is a heck of a question. Like, I mean, I tread cautiously because, you know, I'm just learning like anyone else. But I really think it's rooted in fear, you know. We fear what we don't understand. Maybe hate what we can't conquer. But it is an interesting shift that I'm noticing as well. But it seems to be in favor of shining a light on these things too. It's just like we're experiencing kind of some resistance to it, but we're living in times where things seem to be different than they've ever been, and things are coming out in a way that I don't know historically if it's ever happened. Like on a level, it feels cyclical. Like none of this is new. It's all happened before, and you know it's probably new to us. Then on another level, these times do feel unparalleled. You know, women are being lifted more. People from communities that haven't been recognized are being recognized more in recent history, maybe. But then there's an aspect to this that it's not new. Like this stuff has been, these questions are as old as time, you know? The suppression of women, the suppression of darker people, the fear around it. I really don't claim to have the answers. Like I hesitate and tread cautiously on that because I guess I try to embrace a message that is the unification of opposites. And I would also say, you know, sometimes the pendulum has to swing far left after swinging so far right for so long, and hopefully it'll land in the middle. But yeah, it's a lot of woke culture as well. Like, okay, for example, this is going to sound strange coming from me, but a lot of things are changing, and it's well-intentioned. I go into the Met, and I'm in there with this older white guard. And if you go to the museums these days, you'll see like this, ever since like Black Lives Matter, post George Floyd, there's a lot of it's like a lot of reformation happening. Like they in the Met, there's Nigerian art placed right in the middle of the European wing, like 13th century Nigerian wood carvings in the impressionistic 19th century impressionism room right in the middle of the floor. I'm like, what is going on in here? And then this old white guard comes up to me and he's like, can I be honest with you? Like, this is, I don't like it. I get it, but I don't like it. And I mean, even I thought it was just like over the top in a way. And people have mixed feelings about it, but like, I think what you're speaking to is this, like these birthing pains of a new world. Like things are definitely shifting, and it's well-intentioned people that want to see the change happen, and then there's other people who fear maybe change happening too much too soon. And we're just kind of processing it all together. And so I'm trying to stay on the surface as I can with that, because it's, you know, we may all have different views on these things. But I have personally a more diplomatic position to both sides. I try, at least. Oh, yes, one more clip. Or we do have one more clip, too.
Jeanette was waiting. Okay.
Sorry.
Not only are you incredibly gifted as a painter, but your capacity for self-reflection is just extraordinary and remarkable.
Thank you, man.
That's not my question, but I just wanted to acknowledge that. I wanted to ask you about the tension you hold between having had an opportunity for some freedom from the life you started with, and yet having to stay in relationship with family that is still trapped in that world and trapped in their own unconscious, and how you handle that tension in the sense of what does it do to your own creative flow?
Yeah, that's tough because if I'm not careful, I get pulled into the undertow, and I have to pull away and protect myself. You know, I have a child of my own now. I have my own healing journey that I'm still dealing with, and if I'm not careful, like you'll see moments in the film that are real, where I'm getting hit with real survivor's guilt, real the need to rescue other folks. But on some level, they say your root feeds your crown too. So that I find that when I go back into that, it also feeds my creative process. It also strengthens me. And so it's a balancing act. Not getting away from my roots, but at the same time not letting it pull me in too much. Yeah, maybe we can go into it a little further after this next clip.
Today,
So I think I'm going over time a bit if I'm not careful, so I'll just go right into questions, if that's okay.
If you have any questions.
I mean, yeah, that it's interesting because it definitely kind of speaks to the last question, or the question before last. This process of making this film really took a lot, and it brought a lot up for me. It triggered the need for therapy where before I thought like I was fine. It was like ripping the Band-Aid off of so much. And I really did appreciate the moments with my nephew, being able to say things to him that I wish someone would have said to me. But, you know, what do you say to someone that is saying, you know, I'm actually scared to walk out my door, you know, that will make him get up and feel like, you know, I can do this. And so those moments, a lot of them were just very much non-scripted, unrehearsed, and it was all happening in real time. You know, we were filming in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of when the protests were happening, so we show some of that context, and he's processing these things that he's seeing on television and asking his uncle questions, you know. And he was initially talking about this white lady named, I think her name is Jane or something. It's the lady that was, that she's talking to a crowd of people, and she's like, how many people here would want to be black? And she, you all may have heard of her. I forgot her name. And he was asking me about her. Have you heard of that? You seen that lady that said that? And I think things are changing. People are waking up to the idea of, you know, not too many people will want to have an unfair hand that's dealt to them in that sense. And so we were just having this candid discussion about life, and we thought to let the cameras in on it. Well, cameras just seem to be recording. I look up, I would forget about them, and I look up and they're recording me. But it was definitely this journey of getting used to the cameras to the point where we've forgotten about them. And they would capture those moments, those private moments. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. You know, if I was mindful of the camera being around, you would know, you would feel it. And so they would see us talking, and you know, I'd be in mid-discussion, I'd look up, and the cameras are out. And so that was definitely one of those moments. And in a lot of ways, this film is definitely a love letter to the future generations. People like my nephew, my daughter, they'd be able to return to this over and over. And in that sense, I feel like I already won. I was able to make a film without compromise. I didn't make a film for the awards, although it did really well. But I think my greatest victory is making something that I can look in the mirror and say, you know what, I was honest. So. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Morton will be back with us again tomorrow. The talk for tomorrow is entitled More Light, Illuminating a Path in Dark Times. That will be at 10 o'clock here in the Parish Hall. Again, before you leave, if you would like to have a link To watch the full documentary at home, there's a sign-up sheet on the blue table right by the door. Make sure we have your name and your email address, and we'll send you that. As a reminder, you've got 3 days to watch it, so make sure you get a chance to do that. I also want to say thank you to our St. Spatula's Guild for hosting a wonderful reception. If you are interested in being a part of the committee that helps dream and bring to life this series, speak to Denise or to me. We're always looking for people who are interested not only in the context and the dreams, but also in the execution of this. It takes a lot of work to make this possible, so please let Denise or me or any member of staff know. And I hope you'll be back again tomorrow at 10 o'clock for the second installment. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome.